Thank you so much for this very great honor. As I looked over the list of previous awardees, I was kind of blown away because that list constitutes a map of the constellations that have shaped my personal reading universe. When I came out in 1979, it was not because I had fallen in love with another woman or even because I'd had sex with one. My coming out was completely a function of reading books. If you were raised Catholic like I was, you might call it an immaculate coming out. It started one afternoon when I was browsing in my college bookstore and I picked up a book called Word Is Out, which happened to be the print version of a documentary film from a few years earlier that was a bunch of interviews with lesbians and gay men about how they had realized they were gay and what their lives were like now that they were out. What interesting people, I thought. I read the book in the store for a while, then I put it back on the shelf and I left. And as I was walking back to my dorm, I suddenly had this double epiphany. One, I was like the people in that book, and two, it was okay. And I'm pretty sure that I could not have had the first realization without the reassurance that the second provided. I wouldn't have had the courage to admit into my conscious mind the possibility that I was a lesbian without seeing these examples of people who were not leading bleak and solitary existences on the margins of society, but were happy and leading very productive lives. After that, I began reading everything in the bookstore and the college library and the town library that had anything to do with homosexuality, which at that time it was actually possible to do in the space of one semester. Although a lot of it was quite bleak. Things like Violette Leduc's La Bâtarde, E.M. Forster's Morris, and of course, The Well of Loneliness, which I was disappointed to learn had absolutely no sex in it. But Desert of the Heart gave me a little more hope. Ruby Fruit lesbian section of Our Bodies Ourselves gave me even more. Perhaps the fact that the list was so short was just as well for my romantic prospects, because when I ran out of books, I was forced to go out into the real world and actually meet other lesbians. But fortunately, even after I got a girlfriend, new books kept coming out all the time. Soon I would be reading other authors who have received this award: Lee Lynch, Catherine V. Forrest, Judy Grahn, Joan Nessel. And in a funny backward chronological leap, Anne Bannon, the recipient of the very first Trailblazer Award in 2006. Bannon began writing her Bebo Brinker series in 1957, a few years before I was born, and Naiad Press began reissuing her books in 1983, at which point I began devouring them one after another. And it was that same year, 1983, that I started publishing my first Dykes to Watch Out For cartoons in a very different New York City than the one Bebo and her friends had inhabited. Not only could I live openly as a lesbian in a way that they couldn't, but I didn't have to work as an elevator operator like Bebo did because it was the only job she didn't have to wear a dress for. So I felt very aware of and grateful at the time for the incredible progress that had been made in those two previous decades. And now, somehow, it's been 4 decades since then, since I first published my first cartoon, and I'm even more acutely aware of how much progress we've made, not just in terms of rights and laws and freedom to live openly as who we are, but in the ways that the range of our identities has become so rich and diverse. I'm also acutely aware of how precarious this progress is at a moment that is starting to feel a lot more like 1957 than 2023. So I just want to thank you all very much for this recognition, and thank you to all the other trailblazers who have made my work possible, and thank you in advance to all the trailblazers to come who have their work cut out for them. I'm deeply honored to be a link in this chain. Thank you.